Well, I hope I'll live up to all of that. Just before I get started, I think it was Who Moved My Cheese? Whoever put up Who Ate My Cheese? Unless that's a sequel. And also the Captain's Class, a very good read. I've had a look at that one. Let me just throw a couple at you. The Ego is the Enemy by Holiday. It's a brilliant book, and when you read it, you'll understand how you can solve a lot of our problems in life. The other one is The Courage to be Disliked by two Japanese authors. It's an absolutely outstanding book. It sort of plays towards Adlerian psychology as opposed to Freudian. Freud made you a victim in life. Adler tells you that you own life. And I think it's a really, really important book to read. And there are others, but let's move on. Before I start, I'd like to ask you a little question that you don't have to answer right now, but I want to get it into your head because I wanted to annoy you enough to come out with some thoughts about it. And it's this. I've just come off a call to Colombia, where there's a club very much like this. There's a club going on there called the Coaches Club for World Athletics. And it's for the World Athletics Junior Championships. And here's the point. Take a guess at how many gold medalists from the World Junior Championships end up getting a gold medal in the World Senior Championships or Olympic Games. Well, you'll probably have some kind of figure in your mind, and I'll tell you what it is. To me, it's shocking. 6%. There's a huge attrition from being a world-class medalist as a junior, and 3 years later, by the time you get to 21, 22, moving into the senior ranks. Why is that? That's my question to you. Why do you think that's happening? Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? I don't know. But I'd just like to ask you to have that question annoying you for a little bit, but hopefully not distracting you from what I'm going to say. Well, usually when I have the privilege to chat to great audiences like this, there's usually a little bit of a snicker in the room because of the misfortune I have with my name. And actually, the Commonwealth Games in a previous iteration back in 1976, I was working with a lad called Daley Thompson. And Daley, as you all remember, was a very camera-shy sort of chap. And he said, after the end of the first day, Frankie, you go get your car from the other car park, bring it around to the front, we'll jump in together and we'll escape up to the village. So the stadium there at Meadowbank Sports Centre borders onto a 4-lane carriageway called the London Road. And I realised I just had enough time to get to the other side of the road before a bronze Miro Fiore would hit me. So I launched myself across the road at incredible speed. Well, it was incredible for me. And I'd only got a few strides before there was a loud dong noise and the lights went out. Now you may have noticed I've got a big nose, and you miss it when it's not there. I put my hand up to my face, there's a damp patch, looked down, blood everywhere, looked up, and someone had erected a lamppost on a traffic island in the middle of the London Road without mentioning it to me. Now you'll meet many people in life who walk into lampposts, you'll meet very few who take a 30-metre approach run. So I was staggering around, Daley came rushing out of the car park, he said, who hit you, who hit you, was it Linford? I said, not this time, son, look, here's the car keys, get yourself up to the village, I'm going to have to go to the Royal Infirmary. So Frankie, I'm going to stick with you. Well, to cut a short story longer, we're back into Meadowbank Sports Centre. They phone up the Royal Infirmary in Edinburgh and say, listen, Daley Thompson's coming to the casualty outpatients department. No, has he hurt himself? No, it's not him, it's his coach, Frank Dick. Looks like he's broken his nose. Now, you know what Daley's like. He'll cause bedlam up there, so please protect the patients. So the scene now moves to the casualty outpatients department, and they've done a fantastic job. They've put screens around, a few arms and legs hanging around the side, but you can't see them, so they can't see us. And I've got a straight line through to the operating theatre, apart from one person, a little nurse. And I'm certain she'd practiced what she was going to say. But when she saw Daley Thompson on one shoulder and a giant of a guy called Greg Richards on the other, her little legs went to jelly. She walked up to me, looked me straight in the eyes, and she said, hello, Mr. Nose, how's your dick? Well, absolutely, it took about half an hour to get him off the floor. Is there a clicker? Okay. So, we're not talking about this today. We've had a lot of pretty good technical stuff over these 3 days. But also today, we sort of warmed into an area that I'm particularly keen for us to truly understand. You see, our business as coaches is partly technical, it's kind of a technical business. You know what I'm talking about, the rules, the techniques, the tactics, the training and so on, the stuff that you're taught in life. But there's also the people business. And I don't care how much you know about your technical business, if you're not on top of the people business, you're not going to go anywhere as a coach. Really interesting today that you've actually embraced that. And there's been some really good stuff that actually has encouraged quite a bit of debate and engagement, and I want us to get deeper into this world of the people stuff. Some of you know, I believe there are only two kinds of people out there. There's the mountain people and the valley people. Valley people are the ones you bump into at parties, and they start off the sentences the same way every time. I would have, I should have, or I could have. And then they treat you to an excuse for why they honestly believe they're not in control of the life they live. Valley people think change is the very best a threat, and the worst, something they don't want to belong to, because after all, why fix what ain't broke? Valley people think that winning is the same thing as not losing, so for them a draw is a fantastic result. Valley people are very proud of the t-shirt which says, I will survive. The tragedy of such people is they're losers, but they don't know that they are. On the other hand, there are mountain people. Mountain people decide to take the risk of winning. Now, some people find that an odd expression, but I find the other one very odd, the risk of losing. Because where's the risk in that? Huh? You don't have to practice it. It can be a remarkable talent in life. So there's no risk of losing. The risk is when you decide to climb higher up a mountain than you've ever climbed in your life before, or to look at the horizon and say, that's only the end of what I can see. It's the start of where I can realize my dreams. Mountain people see change as an opportunity, and I've seen the opportunity as like something like the ball in a game. I mean, you've got to seek the thing out so you win it for your team. When you have it, you use it. When our colleagues got it, you support it. When the opposition happens to win it this time round, you learn from their experience so that next time you have it, you can use it even more effectively. Mountain people believe that winning quite simply has been better today than you were yesterday. And on their t-shirt it says, if you're not living on the edge, you're taking up too much room. The good news about mountain people is they're winners, and they know that they are. And I believe I'm in the presence of mountain people today. Why? Because I believe that a winning culture is founded on a learning culture. And you wouldn't be sitting here today if you didn't belong to such a culture. So I'm talking to winners here. But you're thinking to yourself, well, surely, Frank, as a coach, it's your job to create some kind of certainty out there. The truth is, it doesn't matter what arena you go into in life, the only thing that's out there is uncertainty. That's how you coach people. I don't know if you read Chris Hadfield's book, The Astronaut's Guide to Life on Earth. Canadian astronaut. You may remember him as the guy who sang Ground Control to Major Tom when he was floating around in the space station. But the point he was making in his book for the NASA astronauts was they prepared people for it not to be right. They were encouraged never to expect anything to work. So the moment they came into any situation, it wasn't about waiting for life to happen. It was about them making it happen, making it right. Because we own that. We're mountain people after all. We know that. But you might be thinking to yourself, well, if you're either a mountain person or a valley person, what can you do about it? The bit is, folks, it's your choice. You're not born a mountain person or a valley person. It's your choice. It's about attitude. And understand this attitude is something over which you have total control. Nobody else has. When you realize that, you realize how effective you can be in life. Not only for your own future, but for the people around about you. And this kind of was illustrated to me when I saw this piece of action that some of you who've heard me before have seen this. I know you have, but I still find great joy in watching it because it's all about how we turn uncertainty to advantage. This is a French-African football game, right? The score is 2 each. It's a cup final. We're just about to go into extra time. And this is what happened. Is it the top arrow or the bottom arrow? That's the goalkeeper. That's still the goalkeeper and it's halfway. It's still the goalkeeper. Hello! Now listen, I've often wondered if I was the coach, what discussion I would have had with the goalkeeper at the end of the game. Are you going to do this every week? This is a new way of behaving. The fact is, this is what life is like. And when we coach our athletes to take ownership out in the arena, which I believe is the ultimate of what we endeavor to do as coaches, you'll actually have to be prepared for some things like this to happen. For one athlete to see the opportunity, owning the opportunity, and decide, I'm going to make a difference with this. It'll be something that you've never seen before. But it's what this is one of these days. This happened to me once before, John, and I got really angry in the audience, but it was actually my phone that had gone off in my bag. So let me see if we can go forward. Again? Great, we're there. Right, in order to get this thing started and up and properly running today, the way I see it is, if we're going to get this right as coaches, if we're going to help athletes to win, and I'm quite happy using the word winning, by the way. If losing doesn't hurt, winning doesn't matter in life, and I hurt every time something goes wrong. Not in today's context, but out there in the arena. I think in order for us to tackle our approach, our development as coaches, I'm going to throw towards you different little scenarios, different little bits that I've learned over the last 1 or 2 years that I've picked up from this or that coach that's encouraged me to think that maybe I can put everything in under these 6 headings. Clarity, we've got to be clear. Courage, connection, curiosity, commitment, choice. Oh, I'm going back. Is it the other way? Oh, we've worked. Clarity. First of all, clarity of why we do things. First of all, if you think about yourself as coaches in your organizations or with your teams, why do you wear your team colors? What are you going at? Why do you have this stuff on in the first place? What does this badge mean to you? And in order to get that right, I ask myself 3 questions. What do we live for? What do we fight for? And what do we stand for? What do we live for? Alex Ferguson did a fantastic article back in 2013 in the Harvard Business Review, October. If you haven't read it, definitely worth a read. Alex was asked by a very clever commentator in HBR, how on earth he'd managed to get 25 years of sustainable excellence in his club. And his opening remark was quite simple. It's about the club. The club comes first. You see, your team can win this week, but it can lose next week. But whatever happens out there, it's got to bring something to that badge that you wear, to the club, and make the club stronger. And I'll come back to that notion in a second or two. And so that's it. How many of you saw The Devil Wears Prada? Anybody? Yeah. Do you remember The Devil Wears Prada? Andy's been ripped apart by Miranda, and she goes to see her pal Nigel, and she's complaining to Nigel about things, and eventually he says, hey, stop there. You know, I know 100 people who would die to work here. You only deign to work here. And I thought, wow, what a fantastic line that is about commitment and ownership of what you belong to. And another version of that, of course, is if you go to George Patton addressing his troops, where he said, it's not your job to die for your country. It's your job to live for your country and make the other guy die for his. And that's what I mean by what do you live for? What are we into here? with our own clubs, with belonging to coaching. Why do we wear these colours that we have? Next, what do you fight for? By that I mean results are things over which you do not have total control, but your performance you do. That is the focus of everything that we do as a coach, performance. And that allows you to redefine winning as you go through. Winning is not always the result. It's where you've got to with your performance. In track and field, swimming is dead easy, isn't it? Because we have personal bests, for example. And that's a huge motivator as we develop the young people we develop. And finally, what do you stand for? There's absolutely no point in having wonderful values we put on a card, stick in our pocket, post on the wall if we're not living them. So we've got to be crystal clear in what that means for us as coaches. We equally have to be crystal clear when it comes to our objectives. A few years ago, one of the first times I met a particular international rugby team, and I said, what is our job? What is it we're trying to do here? We're wanting to win the World Cup. I said, okay, what does that look like? Well, we'll have to beat New Zealand, we'll have to beat South Africa. I said, no, that's not a good answer. See, what you're telling me is that our objective, our great objective here as a team, is simply to be better than what excellence looks like today. But if we're really on top of clarity in our objectives, you must be asking yourself, what will excellence look like tomorrow? And be better than that. And is that important? Well, I kind of think it is, because that will have huge implications when it comes to conditioning. Because where are you trying? I mean, I'm a simple Scottish person. If you don't know where you're going, how do you plan the journey? And we plan backwards once we know that. If that's where you have to be in 2023 in Paris to go for the World Cup in rugby, where do you have to be 6 weeks before that to make that final step? What does that have to look like? And what about 6 weeks before that? Then 6 weeks before that, and suddenly you're back here. And that guides your next step, not an incremental move from where you are now. Because everything then is in the context of that long-term journey. And I got that idea really from Julio Duhe, the Italian general at the beginning of last century, when he had spotted aeroplanes around, and he thought, maybe this is going to change warfare in the future. Beginning of last century, remember. Victory smiles on those who anticipate the changes in the character of war, not those who want to adapt themselves after changes occur. Well, I don't agree with them 100%, folks, because we've got to be adaptable. We know what change is all about. We've got to be creative. We've got to be adaptable. But we have to learn to anticipate it. We've got to have to learn to be comfortable being uncomfortable. Getting out of the bits that we understand right now and asking ourselves, what do we have to understand by then? And does that have implications to us? Of course it does. If we're expecting athletes and players to change to get up there, what are we doing to make sure we're ahead of that game all the way through the journey? As I said, a winning culture is founded on a learning culture. We've just come through COVID. Oh, okay, the first one of the stages of COVID, right? We've just come through a lot of COVID. And when we were going through that, I had the good fortune to be working with quite a few corporates. And we had long conversations, and most of them were trying to work out, how do we deal with what COVID's doing to us right now? And I used to say to them, but listen, it'll stop, it'll come to an end, or the present situation is going to change. What you have to be looking at is, what will you do then? Are you ready for what happens at the other side of all this? Were we ready to adapt fast to the fact that we can now virtually communicate all over the world? The session across in Colombia is going everywhere at the same time as it's going to a group of coaches like yourself in front of us. I would never have thought about that 2 years ago. I would never have thought about that. I began to think about the plague and the fact that COVID was like the plague. It is, really. Think about it. What did London and Florence do as a response to the plague? Well, London of course, had the misfortune of the fire at the end of it. And so what they did with London was they repaired and rebuilt. They looked at where they were and what life was like at that point, and they simply repaired and rebuilt. That's why, for those of you who've had the misfortune to drive through the centre of London and try to get through these tiny little streets, they are no different than they were after the plague. That's why they're skinny little streets. That's how they were built. No thought of the future. What did Florence do? They came up with the Renaissance. A whole movement to change how we thought, how we behaved, the visions that we had. Were we all prepared as we went through this journey in these difficult times, or are we prepared now to do a Florence? To think completely differently? Not to repair and rebuild, unless these are foundational things that we'd better have in place, but to take that next step. I hope you like the connection of the two things, because that and the previous comments about Dewey bring me to this. Alex Ferguson, all he was talking about was sustainable winning. That's the long-term dream. That's what we want, to be sustainably excellent. Your book, I know, went through this pretty strongly when you spoke about the qualities of excellent coaching. But we've still got to take care of business, right? What's happening now? Now, if you're the head coach and you're a strategic person looking at the greater vision, you could be the victim of what the press and the media and the spectators see. Because what do they want? And what do boards of directors of franchise football teams and so on want? They want results now. They want it now. They do not have the vision that I know a lot of people in this room have of, if we don't have a sense of process, taking the bumps and bruises, we'll never get to this bit up here. But we want results now, so you suddenly focus in now, and that is never going to happen. I promise you, that's never going to happen. So we as coaches have to have the mindset, this double vision kind of mindset that will deal with both. So let me move on then to courage after clarity. There are 3 questions I ask of anyone who wants to work with me or in terms of being a coach or whatever. Whether it's in business, whether it's a coach to coach, whether it's, because I still work with a lot of coaches because, you know, I don't think I get older, I just think I get less young. And I take time with coaches to try to get them to, if you like, address the proper challenge, because it starts with this. What do you want? What is it you want as a coach? And do you ask your athletes that, or the teams that you work with? What do you want? Where do you want to get to? Then how much does it cost? I'm not talking about economics here. I'm talking about the stuff that you are well aware of. The hardships, the struggles, the bumps and bruises that are ahead. And then finally, of course, the biggest question of the lot. Are you prepared to pay the price? I'm kind of confused now. And again, okay, I grew up in a time when there weren't coach education programs. And what I did is what John Bales did, and what other coaches of our area of generation did, was we went out and found it. You know, that was part of what does it cost to travel, to get in to get onto these vans that run up and down the rowing areas. What do you call them, John?
The course.
Course, right. As he did, right? Jumped over a fence and got onto the van so you can listen to the coaches and how they were dealing with things, so you could learn from them. And it puzzles me now that so many young coaches want education to come to them. They don't want to go out and get it, which is why it's good news to have all of these great ideas of people recommending to other people the books that they read, because part of our life is what I call co-opetition, right? We're in it to compete with each other, for goodness sake, to knock the snot out of each other when we go out into the arena. That's what we're there for. But that only happens for a couple of months in most sports in the year. For the rest of the time, if you want coaching to grow, you have to learn together. You have to learn to work together, to cooperate. Coming back to the word, it's about co-opetition in our life. We've got to get into that kind of mindset, because that's how we'll make coaching grow. And if we make coaching grow, it will create a greater sense of resource to make us personally grow as coaches. There's a session, I've deliberately put this under courage, but I could have stuck it under curiosity. There's a session that I learned to do in working with Google and with Microsoft and with BT. And it was to have people try to fracture how they thought and how they behaved and how they did things. So once at least a year, but I like to think maybe get twice, or you can do 3 times if you like, is to sit down and spend half a day doing this. Let's forget the way we do things right now. What could we do? Who could we be if we did something completely differently? What could we do? But this is the only way to do it, Frank. Is it? There's never just one way to do anything, folks. I'll tell you that now. And if anybody in this room is deluded enough to think there is, forget it. There's always other ways. Things we can do better, things we can do differently. And so we ask ourselves in this session, together, in little groups and so on, what could we be? What could we do? What are the possibilities out there? What are our options? What if? Why not? These kind of questions. And you dig and dig and dig. And maybe to begin with, people find that a kind of a strange thing. Well, Frank, why fix ain't broke? It'll be broke sometime. Have a good think about it now. And once you've got these things, you come out with ideas. I'll call them dreams, if you like. You come out with these things. And then you come to the second part of the day. What will we do with that? What will we be? What decisions will we make? What actions will we take? Can we get into a world, ourselves as well as our athletes, where there are no excuses and where there are no limits to what we do? And I kind of think of it like this. Newton's cradle, you know this stuff, right? Just imagine that that's all sitting there nice and comfortable. And we then take the morning session to disrupt. This ball hits this one. You come out with your dreams and your ideas. It hits this one. You make a decision based on them. It hits this one. You come up with a design, and delivery flies off the other end. But we know, of course, that ball is going to come back again. And that's why I'm suggesting to you, don't do this as a one-off, folks. You do this from time to time. Because if you think the world is going to flatten off in its rate of change, forget it. Some of you may have read a book back in, think late 70s. So some of you weren't born at that time. But for those of you who were born, there was a book in the late 70s that was called Future Shock by Alvin Toffler. And I think it was the start of the second chapter when he said, the world today is as different to the world into which my father was born as that world was from Julius Caesar's. What was he saying? It's accelerating. It's accelerating. In 1984, when I went to the Olympic Games in LA, it was the first time people were sending messages on email to other people. And they could do it by going to little portals around the village. That was 1984. Think of the world you're in now, where on your phone you've got a bigger capacity than any of the huge mainframes that existed at that time. And people now make the decisions. The influence of this little thing here through social media on the moods of our young people growing up. We've got a generation coming through who are really dependent on being liked on this. And the moment somebody sends them a dislike or a thumbs down, they begin to get upset, as if it's got any meaning at all. But this thing is changing how our young people are going to grow up. And we've got to get on top of this stuff, folks. Change is going to accelerate. It's not going to flatten off. And we've got to have this mindset like this, is to try. I'm not saying this is perfect by any means, But I'm telling you, I tried this myself just to shake myself out. Some of the things, as John will aver, I'm saying now, and I said it quite a few years ago, some of the things have changed quite dramatically. Why? Just learning from other people, spotting what's happening out there, coming to the issues on mental health. A few months ago, so it's two years ago now, I worked with Dorset and Cornwall and Dorset Police. And they were very concerned that what was happening around the country was that police officers were experiencing a greater incidence of mental health issues than ever before. And we had a little look at that. And there's an app being worked on that at the moment. We had a little look at that. And I tried, what do I know about mental health? All I had to do in that day was come in and talk about how you handle pressure, how you continue to perform excellently under pressure. Because I thought that's all it was, really. These officers out there, these children out there, you out there, pressure grows. Can you still perform? Can you manage that pressure? And so to me, pressure is a personal perception. It's really personal. What's pressure to you is not personal to the lady behind you. It's not pressure across here. It's your personal perception on a rugby field, in a soccer field, in children. I began to then have a look at the social media and its effect on young people's mental health, 12, 13, 14. And then I asked the question, I remember asking it that day, I wonder when we should start talking about how to handle pressure, how early we should be going in with our children. And then 2 months later, a very close personal friend of mine in Australia confided that her sister had been having difficulties with family things. And there were a number of children, and she went into the children's bedroom in one morning, and a young 9-year-old had hung himself from the bunk beds because he couldn't take the pressure that was hitting him from the world round about. John, I don't know how early we go in here, mate, but we'll have to start going in. We have to start going in really, really early. And if it's not done in schools and it's not handled by parents, we as coaches have got to think this stuff through at that kind of level as early as possible. And we've got to be cooperative on the whole thing, understand, share the knowledge so that we can effect the kind of change that this new generation needs. Sorry. I'm going to show you a video now about courage. And if you haven't seen this race, I want you to think very early on who your money would be on to win it. The 4x400 meters. United Kingdom, Ukraine, and Russia. Take the baton off there. Next, so you see Russia in the front, Ukraine there. The next athlete behind them, down the field there, is French. So good old battle going on there. Ukraine putting a bit of pressure on Russia. Similar to life, in fact. Here they're going into the bend. British girl tracking them down. Who's your money on now? Come on, guys. Who do you think's going to win? The British girl coming back with a last burst. Have a look at the French girl and watch what happens here. Remember where she was on the back straight. Courage. 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 How about that, eh? I wonder what was going through that young woman's head going up the back straight. Was she thinking, I could win? Or was she thinking to herself, I see what the size of the task is, I see how far they are ahead of me, and I've actually got all the way to down there to do something about it. And then, And you could say, lucky win. I don't think so. I think it's a wonderful win. I mean, the French commentators afterwards, I don't know how many times they said incroyable, but it was some kind of a world record on its own. But let's come back to the previous, the whole notion of curiosity. There are some things in life you can be taught. The formal education, the technical, the science, the discipline of stuff. There are other things in life you can only learn, the informal stuff, through life experience. And the problem with that, of course, is, as Vernon Law averred, experience is the cruelest of all teachers, because it can give you the test first and the lesson second. But that's the way you learn to make your decisions. You don't learn to make decisions by having the coach give advice during the activity. Now, I know that I'd fall out with a lot of coaches on this. You're not there to advise when the challenge is out there. If you're making the decisions for them, when are they going to learn how to make decisions? They won't. And we've got to be strong on that. There are some times where you have to step back. If you've not done if you're out there and you're frantically trying to do this or that with your athletes, you've not done your job. Your job should be to take them to the point so that they're ready for the fight. You don't take your hands back then and tell them how to fight. It's their job to work that out. Tell them what to do, but leave it for them to work it out. Who's going to tell me who quoted that? Which great coach came out with that? Basketball coach? One of the greatest of all time? John Wooden. Yeah. So I'm not saying anything to you that hasn't been said before, folks. The bit that's solid in this, all the way through, is your values. They are non-negotiable. They are permanent. They are strong when you live them. But actually, your reliance on the formal education of what you're taught actually becomes less as you go through, and the importance of this bit here, of learning through experience, that becomes more important. It's critical that we get an attitude as part of our learning culture to learning all the time. And it's an active learning journey. Be a learning magpie. Look for things. Sergio's already put the stuff up here. Here's a way to do it, folks. Share us your information. Be a learning magpie. Learn on the move. When you're talking to your athletes, you're learning that you should be learning as much from them as they're learning from you, I think. Daly always used to say to me that he taught me more than I taught him. But that's the way it goes with Daly. Right. Learn on the move. Get accustomed to hot and cold debriefs. The moment you finish what you're doing, the moment the athlete comes off there, where the heart's still pounding, they're sweating, and their brain's still in the turmoil of the activity, that's your hot debrief. The red arrows are debriefing the moment they land down, before they've even come off there. They're talking to each other about what happened in this moment, what happened in that moment. You were out of place. And the great thing is, they put their hands up very quickly. Number 7 here, I went into the spin a fraction too early, won't do it next time. It would be helpful if number 8 was in such and such a place. I think the hot debriefs are really important. A lot of coaches would argue with me that, no, Frank, you have to wait till you've got all the data. No, if we are coaches, we're supposed to have the mind to make judgment calls and to learn from the heat of this moment. Because a few days later, we can get back into the analysis and get into the debrief. And remember, there'll be things that come back to you that perhaps you're not too happy with. But remember this, feedback is critical, it's not criticism. I still speak to coaches, and they still say that it's criticism. It's not personal, it's professional. There's some things you need to hear in life as a professional that you don't like to hear personally. And what we've got to learn to do in that is to have what I call candor. I'll come back to this slide in a second. I like to create the notion in any organization when you're working with a team, when you're working in your own businesses and so on. I like to get the idea of creating a culture of constructive candor, saying it the way it is. Now, I have to say, in the United Kingdom, particularly in England, we do not like to do that. We do not like to hurt other people's feelings, right? We give a contrary opinion, and that's personal, you know. Am I right, anybody? Would we get, yes, a couple of nods in there. We don't like to do that. But listen, if you do not have constructive candor, on the one side, you don't have honesty. If you don't have honesty, you will never have trust. On the other side, if you don't have constructive candor, you don't have accountability. If I don't think you're getting it right, and there's something out there, I owe it to you to tell you that. In fact, I owe it to the team, because if you keep on behaving like that, we're all going to be out the window, right? I want you, why am I here? I want you to be the best in the world at what you do. I want you to be the world's best, right? So listen to me when I speak to you. It's not personal. It's what you need to hear in order to grow. And if you're not accountable, folks, you don't have respect. And I think that model is so important to have at the back of your mind all the time when you're leading your teams. But this comes back to, I have to say, a nut that I have to crack probably every day of my life with different people. Preparation is everything. Frank, there was a disaster out there. He did this and she did that. Your preparation was crap. Well, how do you mean? They did that out there. You didn't prepare them for it. Preparation is absolutely everything. And when you think you've done, when you know why, who, what, and how out there, you have to test it. And some of you will come across this expression, maybe not the second one, red teaming. When you've got your plan, when you've got your strategy, whether it's a business one, whether it's a tactic for the weekend that's coming up on the field, get a group to stand outside what you've done and to imagine they're the opposition. What could they begin to think, what could they do to unpin everything that you've planned? What could they do to destroy your preparation? And then we have a good conversation as to how we can deal with that. The other one is pre-mortems. Now, you know what a post-mortem is, right? But some of you have heard about this expression before, but pre-mortems, I think the first person, or the first group that did this was the United States SEALs, when they were going to get bin Laden. What they did was they were imagining after the event, and it had been a disaster, an absolute disaster. And the questions then said, why was it a disaster? What could have gone wrong out there? And for those of you who know the history of that, one of the things they got into in the pre-mortem was the helicopter going down. And the helicopter went down. But they were already mentally ready for how they could deal with what that could do to the mission. Ultimately, the mission was a successful one. But I like the idea, folks, when you're doing your preparation, when you're getting ready for what's out there, again, whether it's a 4-year plan or whatever, get into this stuff. Test your preparation. You go in to speak to somebody, explain your preparation to the manager or whatever in the organization. Are you ready for some of the questions that are going to come back to you? Because they'll come back. Have you actually done this? So my point about preparation is, it is everything, but make sure that you've dealt with the whole thing. Looks a messy diagram, no apologies for it. The performance cycle, a lot of people think the coach with the athlete develops a plan, you do a performance diagnostic or a debrief after a review afterwards, you refer it to your performance database, you come up with a prescription for change, and then you continue the cycle. But that's not the way it's done. If we're really in the business of being great as coaches, and we really want the best for this athlete. Once you get to here, of course you look at the athlete's performance out there. But you also have to look at the plan that you did. And you also have to look at how you did it as a coach. So this review has to deal with all of these three things. Then you refer to your performance database. And when it comes up for the prescription of change, be prepared to change how the athlete what you're going to do to help the athlete, what the plan will look like, and also can you change your coaching? Is it necessary to do that? As I said, we're founded on a learning culture. And this is part, I believe, of continuous learning. So what about commitment? I was asked first time I got invited into rugby by Eddie, back when he was in Japan. And he said, Frank, have you got a very simple model just to give people a framework for how you do a strategy? I said, yeah, I'll do it this way. First of all, the only thing you control in life are the controllables, right? You can't control the weather, you control what you do about it, right? And so, do you have a clear picture when you're preparing your plans of what you can control? Are you prepared to control them? Then you ask yourself, where can I get advantage in all of this? David Brailsford, you remember, was called marginal gains. Some of you remember that. But as when Ross Brawn was with Ferrari, he had a good look at how you eliminate errors. You know what you control, that's your basics, your fundamentals in terms of fitness, your basic techniques, all the understanding that you need to have in place here. Error elimination. What Ross Brawn did was, when he came to Ferrari, the pit stop fastest time was 8 seconds, right? Refuel, jacking the car up, taking the nuts off, taking the wheels off, putting the wheels back on, then the nuts, refueling the car, clearing the visor, adjusting I can't say it fast enough. But that's what they did, 8 seconds. He got it into his head that you could change all of that. He started to move things, make things easier for the people to do more, get rid of all the wrong movements. And he got it down to 6 seconds. They then stopped refueling the car. That wasn't allowed anymore. And Red Bull got it into their heads that they should work on this to see who could get the world record. They got it down to 3.2 seconds in competition. All the things I said in 3.2 seconds. Impossible, right? Nope, they did it. They did it. So have a look at how we can eliminate error. But what about the edge up here? 2012, young Scottish boy wants to get into the United Kingdom 4x100 meters freestyle. And so he went to see one of David Brailsford's coaches and said, tell me something that you do. And what kind of things do you do to get the extra edge? He said, well, we do lots of things. Well, tell me one thing, just one little thing. Give me an idea. Well, do you know we put vinegar on the spokes of the wheels? Really? Yeah. He said, what difference does that make? Almost nothing. Oh, so he went away, but this was a stone in the kid's shoe. And so after a couple of weeks, he'd had enough. He phoned him back and said, I really don't get it. Why would you do something that does nothing? He says, I didn't say that. I said, almost nothing. Now I'm going to show you a disgrace of a slide. Personal friend of mine, Marco Cardinali, put it together. I modified it a couple of bits. But these are all the bits in human performance that if you dealt with them, any one of these, and you made it better or did it differently, it would make almost nothing of a difference. But see how many there are, folks. When you add all these almost nothings together, you'll get a very significant something. So let me take you back to the previous slide again. We've covered this territory here. These are all technical, they're kind of more the technical basics of things. But now we come into our attitudes and our behaviors. We've got to have a mindset that's agile to change. We've got to be able to leverage the uncertainty to our advantage. And if we get these bits right, we'll make right decisions under pressure. And if that's right, we'll be pursuing consistent performance excellence. Right? Remember in life that you are the sum total of the decisions that you make. It's your decisions that change everything. And so that's why all of these other bits and pieces have to be in place first before we go and deliver the results that we seek. Well, also under the area of commitment is how you deal with failure and how you deal with success. I brought Alex Ferguson in to have a chat with some coaches and athletes 2 or 3 years ago. And that was his opening remarks. The most important thing that a coach has to handle for himself or herself or their athletes is how they handle defeat and success. I love this quote from Dennis Waitley. I've actually stick it on my desk at home. Failure is delay, because I've had a lot of them. It's not defeat. It's a temporary detour. It's not a dead end. Failure is something we avoid only by saying nothing, doing nothing, and being nothing. Taking ownership, going out there and making things happen. But what about success? I was brought up, my mum, I always can remember often saying to me, success breeds success, Frankie. And I believe that. But what Alex was saying is that if you're not careful, you can get seduced by it and think that nothing else has to change. In 1993, he was manager of Manchester United, taking it over, and he realized, having won the Premiership here, that no other team in history had won the Premiership back-to-back. So he brought in Gary Pallister, who was the captain of the team. He said, listen, son, we've noticed there are a couple of players in the squad who think that that was good enough, and they're satisfied. What do you mean, boss? Well, they think that they don't have to do anything more. He says, who are they? Not my job, son. You're the captain. You must be right on top of this. Be vigilant. So you can imagine, week after week in the season, Gary's coming back in. You'll have to tell us, boss. We can't find them. Who are they? He said, be vigilant. It's your job, son. Keep your eyes open. Came to the end of the season. My goodness, they've won it back-to-back premierships. And so Gary came in and said, well, you'll have to tell us now. Who were they? He said, well, there was nobody, son. But you have to keep your eyes open, because you never know what's happening out there. And of course, you can't get away with that too often, by the way, folks. So you'll have to think of another strategy next time round. But it's important. You can become complacent. And success, if you're not careful, can derail progress. This slide, I shouldn't have put this in because this is a day on its own with us. With John, sometime I'm quite sure you'll do something like this. When you go out there and you're in the threatening atmosphere of life, you're bound to feel fear. You've taken a risk, you've stepped beyond the line, and you're bound to have fear. If you're not careful, fear can have you feeling overloaded and overwhelmed. It can have you get you completely distracted by the problem, and you forget what you're there for, to deliver your performance. Now, you remember from school, there are 3 things that fear can do to you, right? You can freeze, you can flee, or you can fight, right? If you freeze, your brain is closed and trapped and you'll go nowhere. If you flee, you're trying to avoid the whole thing, you're threatened and you get out of it fast. What we have to do is learn to step back from the problem, step up to the problem, and step into the problem to resolve it. Now, all of you who are much cleverer than me know about right and left brains and so on. When you're out there and you're into instant action as a player out there, you don't have enough time for the most part to be rational and to go on to, can't remember which side of the brain it is, right? But sometimes when you get breaks in the game, the leadership on the field has to be talking to each other very fast and doing this exercise themselves, because that helps them to move towards an open way of thinking, where you'll face the attack, you will attack, you'll fight, and you'll accept challenge. After that point, you've moved from here to trust and belief. At this point, you get a sense of overview and a sense of your ability to overcome, and your solution focus, not problem distracted. And once you get to that kind of clear thinking, then we'll crack it. Then we'll crack it. As I said, John, you know this is a bigger subject than 2 minutes up here. But at some point, I think from all of our points of view, because I come back to my point about the pressures that we're under as coaches, the pressure that our kids are under. We've got to learn this stuff and how we can make it work for us and for our kids. Connection. There are 3 skills you need if you're going to work in a team. One's called the number in your shirt, the badge on your shirt, and you in your shirt. Right? The number is your roles and responsibilities. That's what you're normally selected for when you come into a team. The bit about the badge on your shirt is how do we relate to each other? How can I be the wind beneath your wings when you need that? And how can you be the wind beneath mine when I need you to be there? This is about the interdependence of relationships with others in the team. And finally, you're unique, for goodness sake. When you come in here, your skills are not like anybody else's. You are you. Are you bringing these skills and your background to the team? So we've got to have these 3 things in place. The way I see it when it comes to a game, then, is this part of the interrelationship that's going out there. When you pass the ball to a receiver, when you pass your learning and communication to an athlete or to a customer if you're in business, you've got to remember that the customer or the athlete is going to have something they're going to do with that. In a team situation, you're going to end up passing the ball to the receiver's receiver, the customer's customer. To learn how to pass the right ball to this person up here, you actually need this person here to coach you in how to do that. Because if you're not careful, you give passes, you communicate in life the way you want to communicate or pass. But the truth is, you should be looking at what the receiver wants and needs. And sometimes you then have to understand that person's world enough to know what's going to happen next, so that you almost anticipate the whole thing. And you learn from this person here so that we can make that cycle right. The other bit about connection, folks, I'd like to mention to you is not, I can't remember if it's McRaven or who's the other American SEALs General, Admiral, it'll come back to me. One of the 2 of them wrote a book called The Team of Teams. It had a different concept to this. If you're interested in military stuff, read it. Basically, it was about taking decision-making from a hierarchical structure to people delivering action on the ground, which was happening in Afghanistan, where the United States were being, the greatest military operation in the world, were being unpicked by the ragtag and bobtail of the Taliban. And they couldn't work this out at all. Anyway, that's that story. When working with, say a rugby team, you are the rugby coaches, that's your department. You are the strength and conditioning coaches. You are the medical services. You are the logistics services out there. You are the equipment side. Every one of you is important to what happens out here with these players, right? You've all got a role in all of this. And it's specific to you. And it relates to what happens here. Otherwise, why are you doing your role? Why is it necessary to have you? And so this is the picture I got in my mind. That each person in this team, for a start, and all of you think the same way, I want you to be world-class in whatever your specific role is in the team. Right? First, that's it, number 1. Number 2, I want you to look at other people in your team. You must ask him, work with him, how can you, Karen, help him, Adam, to be world-class in his role, right? And if we get this perfect, you will learn how to help somebody in this team or somebody in that team to be world-class in their role. So the cohesive relationship stuff, when it comes to sport and business, the notion of team is, in most organizations, you're a team of teams. I had to go with a company just the other week there, when I said, we were talking to the sales guys, And guys, generic term. I was talking to the salespeople, and I said, do you know the name of the person that signs your check every week? Or do you know the person that sends your stuff into your bank account? Oh, no, that's an administration. Do you like getting your check? Yeah, it's a pretty good idea. I like to have my check. Well, I think it would be a good idea to be nice to that person. At least acknowledge what they do. Pick up a phone sometime and say, listen, once again, you've given me my check at the right time of the month. I think you do a fantastic job. Right? Something like that, just something stupid like that. Because we're all in it together. Connection is important. One other little thing about connection whilst I'm up here is that I'm a huge fan of somebody who I thought was one of the greatest athletes in history, Leonardo da Vinci. I've got every biography that's ever been written in English on da Vinci. But the most recent one by Isaacson is outstanding in analyzing why he was great. And he put it down to two things: observation and connection. His powers of observation. He used to sit and watch dragonflies in the moat around, might have been Milan. And he spent hours doing it. And he could work out the order in which a dragonfly's wings beat. How do we know that? It's actually in his notes. One of the interesting things about Da Vinci is there was nobody keeping a record of him when he was alive. All that we've ever learned about Da Vinci is what he wrote in his notebooks. And I'll come back to that concept in a second. But the connection part, he had the extraordinary ability, which I think a lot of you have, by the way, and if you don't, work on it, and it's to connect ideas. Hence, I'm throwing it in this section. What do I mean by that? He was the first person in history to define how the circulatory system worked in the human body. But he did it by looking at something else altogether. Now think very carefully what it looks like. I'm sure somebody's going to come up straight away with what it was. There's actually two things, but one thing in primary. Think of something that's like the circulatory system. You probably pass them every morning when you're driving to work or whatever. They're usually at the side of the road with big leaves on them. Trees. He saw trees and he worked out how you had these capillaries, venules, veins, the major veins, the minor veins. He worked this out using that as his analogy. He also thought about rivers, by the way, along the same lines. And why is that important to us? One of the greatest skills you can ever master as a coach is your ability to tell a story, to make connections in people's lives. To take this bit. How often have you said to your athlete something like, hold yourself, if your athlete did a equestrian, I remember doing this with a long jumper, hold yourself for the jump. And she got that straight away. She understood how that would feel in her body. Great book, by the way, and I'm frantically trying to remember the name of the author, is The Language of Coaching. Anybody read it? Put that one down. Really good. It's a bit unnecessarily large, but it's very, very good. And the point he's making is that we have to get our words right to help athletes feel what we're saying. They've got to feel it. They've got to get a kinesthesis about the whole thing. So moving on from there. Connection. Very quickly on this one. I'm pretty sure you've all seen this diagram, right? And notionally, it's not far off the mark. Notionally. Because you start somewhere and you finish somewhere. In my mind, you start off and you're a Fiat Uno, right? And by the time you get to here, you're a Ferrari Testarossa. But the fact is, whilst that's right, there are also Formula One cars that are Ferraris. There are quite different kinds of cars. And they don't grow out of that, that's for sure. And they're not desperately related to that. The number of times now you can find an athlete or a player who's absolutely top of the pile, when it's in the Premiership or whatever, you then think, best player, get the person in the team. And when they come into the national team, they can't deal with Test rugby or international. I remember Ian McGeechan and Jim Telfer at a press conference way back when the Lions beat South Africa, in South Africa. And when we were talking about selection, a couple of the press boys jumped up and said, "You're not picking the best players." To which he replied, "That's not my job. It's my job to pick the best team." And so that's what we have to have in mind. I think that there's one progression here, right? Then a coach will take athletes all the way through here. There's another situation where at this level, we now have physical education not doing the job it used to do. And young people are coming to sports and clubs without a strong physical foundation. And to me, it seems to be necessary now in our coach education programs to completely review what this level is all about. You may have a preliminary out there, but once you get into here, I believe people should be considered to be world-class as coaches to beginners, coaches to developers, or coaches to high performers. I think we should be able to get your grade 5 or your level 5 or your world class in a continuum up here as coaches. We still have situations where beginner athletes are given to beginner coaches. And that is criminal. That's criminal. Because if you don't get the foundations right, the wheels are bound to fall off sooner or later. So we've got to train people to be the best in the world at working with beginners. We may have to have an education program which encourages people to work as a sense of partnership, of passing an athlete from here to here to here. Because the biggest problem in this diagram is that there's no sense of management. Because this happens, athletes can be passed on. Now you could say, well, software will deal with all that, Frank. Well, nah, maybe. But we'll certainly need a human mind dealing with it. And my conclusion down here, by the way, is that at some point in here, athletes come into this performance, this elite performance level, which is a different animal than this one here, and they need a different kind of coaching and preparation. And I'd like to think that we've got coaches in this room who could be any one of these. Oh, and did I miss the one at the top? If the coach to the beginners is getting it right, he or she will not only be preparing them for this to one day be on the podium, but in this to at least belong to sport and activity for life. Because where else are they going to learn? I spoke about mental health. Where do we start building that in? Where do we start building in attitudes to activity being important in our lives? Because I've run very quickly through here, I'm not going to run through. Sorry, let me go back to that one. Yeah, performance. Yeah, this is an important one. Coaches can get it into their heads that performance is a linear progression. It's not, folks. It goes in steps. Performance component progressions are not in parallel. Trying to develop somebody's speed does not actually go in parallel with somebody's endurance or somebody's power and somebody's specific strength and so on. They improve at different rates, and we've got to be smart enough to understand these things. No two athletes are the same. You must have heard the old quote, you never cross the same river twice, because it's never the same river. Even the child you see in front of you today is not the same as the child you saw yesterday. And we have to have a mindset of that, adjusting, making sure that who's in front of us is the person that we know well enough to coach. I gave you the statistic earlier on in the day. Talent selection for high performance youth programs comprises achievement in what we want is for athletes to deliver their peak performance in their senior years. In track and field, 60% of the medalists will be between 24 and 20, of the gold medalists will be 24 and 28, 85% between 22 and 30. There are outliers, of course, but that's what we're preparing them for. Remember the question I asked you at the very beginning. 6%. 6%. Were the coaches who were handling that process, that long-term athlete development program, did they have this in mind? Or were they going for the glory of being a coach attached to a world medal when somebody was 19 and having little care of what happened thereafter? Have I run out? Yeah, my last little piece here, choice. There's something you use in the United States military that now we use in our military, probably all militaries that do now. It's in how you make your decisions. Orientate, what do you feel? What do you hear? What do you see? Orientate, read the context and the meaning. What does it all mean? Call the shot, right decision or call for effective outcome. And that also means our coaching style. You're choosing your coaching style, having observed and orientated, and finally act or deliver on the decision. The OODA loop, really important. I think I've run out of battery here. You'll have to move on for me, Sergio. Okay, very quickly, coaching points. Be clear and remain persistently focused on your goal. Go beyond what excellence will be. Point I mentioned at the very beginning. Secondly, live your values. Next, remember that coaches plan backwards, not forwards, but be agile in the game of change. Remember to be prepared and to learn continuously. Next, failure and success must be managed. Be comfortable being uncomfortable. Be process and performance focused. Monitor and review both persistently. Accept that you're vulnerable in life. You're human, you're going to make mistakes. Admit them, learn them, don't repeat them. So know what you know what you don't know, and make sure you know somebody who doesn't, bring them to the party. Because we can't know everything, and you must never make an athlete the victim of your limitations. It's a people business we're in. Remember the candor. Remember microscopes, radar and spark. I'll only cover the spark gap here. I remember when I was teaching to begin with, I'd just fresh come out of college. I was teaching at a public school. I wasn't, you'll have gathered, I wasn't a public school kind of guy. And I was resident. And the head of the school, the head boy, he wasn't much younger than me. And he said, "Sir, would you like to come up and have coffee on Sunday evenings and listen to some music?" I said, "Well, yes, that was a wonderful idea." I thought this would give me a fantastic opportunity to show them just how hot I was when it came to music and stuff. After 3 weeks, I got a shout down the cloisters at Worksop College. Northcote Green, the headmaster, he never referred to people by their first name nor by the title. And so I heard this bellow coming down the corridor, "Dick!" Well, you've no idea how many heads turned round at that point to look at where the noise had come from. But I knew he was speaking to me. And I went down and said, "Sir," he said, "always be careful, Dick, not to get too close, or they won't know who you are." Big lesson to me. In the relationships we have with our athletes, in fact, with anyone, there's a gap. Some people think, well, you can hardly even see the gap, so why don't you close it? If you close the gap completely, there's no spark, and the relationship won't work. Oh, I get it. Make it open so that people are really clear. Open it too wide, and it doesn't work. I can't tell you what your gaps are with the various relationships that you have, but remember, that gap has to be there, because that gap is what makes the whole thing work. Three things, really important. Be persistent, be resilient, be patient. Eilish McCoglin last night, how many people thought that she would outkick the best in the world in the home straight? How many years has she been destroyed in the home straight? Be patient. Keep bouncing when it doesn't work. Be persistent. Never, of course, be satisfied. And remember, you never arrive. The brick walls are that you will come up against brick walls. Has anybody read Randy Pausch's book, The Last Lecture, or watched the video? No? If you haven't, please take time and get it on YouTube. He'd been diagnosed with terminal cancer, pancreas. He had 6 months. He was one of the top animators for Disney. Brilliant, brilliant mind. Young wife, beautiful young kids, tinies. And at Mellon University, you had the opportunity when you were leaving to have a final lecture, in which case the doors were open, anybody could come. The place was packed. And he gave a presentation called Living Your Childhood Dreams. And really was talking to these tinies that were sitting in front of him, because he knew when they really should be hearing these words, he would never have a chance to do that because he wouldn't be here. If you haven't seen the movie, please see it. It's not a teary job. Trust me, it's not a melancholy thing. It's a really invigorating, motivational thing. But he said very early on, remember folks, you will hit brick walls. And then he said this, the brick walls are not there to keep you out. The brick walls are there to give us a chance to show how badly we want something. So, last piece of video. This is from a movie called Pay It Forward. There's a piece in the movie where he gives his class a challenge. And it's kind of the same challenge I'd like to give all of you today.
What does the world mean to you? Come on, a little class participation here. Is it just this class you want to get out of? Your house, your street? Any further any of you want to go than that? Yes?
The mall. That's only like 2 miles away from me.
Well, let me ask you another question. How often do you think about things that happen outside of this town? You watch the news? Yes? No? All right, so we're not global thinkers yet, but why aren't we?
Because we're 11.
Good point. What's your name?
Trevor.
Maybe Trevor is absolutely right. Why should we think about the world? I mean, after all, what does the world expect of us?
Expect.
Of you. What does the world expect of you?
Nothing.
Nothing. My God, boys and girls, he's absolutely right. Nothing. I mean, here you are, you can't drive, you can't vote, you can't even go to the bathroom without a pass from me. You're stuck right here in the 7th grade. But not forever. Because one day, you'll be free.
Yeah!
All right, well, what if on that day you're free, you haven't prepared, you're not ready, and then you look around you and you don't like what the world is? What if the world is just a big disappointment?
We're screwed.
Unless you take the things that you don't like about this world and you flip them upside down, right on their ass. Don't tell your parents I use that word. And you can start that today. This is your assignment.
Think of an idea to change our world and put it into action.
Extra credit, it goes on all year long. Now, wait a minute. What? What's wrong with this? What's the matter? Yes?
It's like so
So what? There must be a word to finish that sentence. Someone help her?
weird. Crazy.
Weird. Crazy.
Hard. Bummer.
Bummer. Hard. How about possible? It's possible. The realm of possibility exists where? In each of you. So you can surprise us. It's up to you.
And that's what I've been kind of trying to say to you today. It's down to you guys. You might think you won't make a difference in life, but you will. Have you ever thought about this? There's only going to be one of you in all of time. There's not a Dolly the sheep out there. There's you. You are completely different to everybody else in this room and everyone else on this planet. What you can bring to the world nobody else can by definition. So if you can be all that you can become, when you go out there, you will make a fundamental difference. Of course, it's going to be, nobody else can do that for you, remember. If you deny the world your difference, the world has to be a lesser place. So you have a choice to make. And this choice, I think, was perfectly summed up by Robert Frost.
So,
Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that's made all the difference. I'd like you all to take the road less traveled by and to change the world. Huge privilege to speak to you. I've gone well over my time. I apologize for that, but I don't get a chance very often to speak to great coaches. Thank you.